Hey, my name is Frank Schaefer, and once in a while I see a little something that is a kind of metaphor for a bigger issue and a bigger problem. You know, this morning I was reading the New York Times, again, as I do every morning, with 7 other newspapers from all kinds of political views, and a headline jumped out at me about a brilliant figure skater, and the headline listed her and said she's her age and what she does, and then it said, and she's pansexual. You know, I had to stop for a minute and think about who the young editor or writer was that thought that was a good idea, necessary to put in. You know, Donald Trump is sitting in the White House right now because liberals like the New York Times have made a habit and a fetish out of always reaching for some identity politics label, whether it's gay, trans, transsexual, black, white, brown, doesn't matter, but they seem incapable of understanding that a lot of people who are also liberals and who work and vote for Democrats are as equally sick of having our universe, even sports reporting, defined by those sorts of monikers. What is wrong with the liberal mindset that cannot look at the world except to divide it into these little watertight compartments of interest, as if somehow this is what defines somebody? You know, when I read about a figure skater, there's a lot I want to know, but her sexual inclination is not what I'd put in the headline. I wouldn't put it in the story either, but not in the headline. That's not what pulls me into a sports story. You know, I watched all the Summer Olympics last year because I had an infection in my jaw, and a very good oral surgeon fixed it, but I was in a lot of pain for a lot of days and up all the time, so I watched all sorts of events. Women's basketball, volleyball, hockey, shooting, archery. And you know, one question I never asked myself while watching any of these sports of women or men or whomever it might be is that person gay? Is that person trans? Are they pansexual? Are they brown? Are they white? Are they from my ethnic background or not? I watch the sports because I believe in the intrinsic value of the hard work that goes into each athlete's performance. It's the same way I look at art. You know, one reason I love a certain podcast more than any other podcast, it just happens to be my favorite, with Tom Holland and Dominic Sandbrook, British historians and writers, brilliant men. And one reason I love it is because they do fantastic series on history, the American Civil War, the French Revolution, various kings and queens of England, Mesopotamia, ancient history, whatever it may be. But what they never get into is a modern spin on a past age. They don't talk about whether the person was a slave owner or a colonist or failed to do enough to right the wrongs that he or she would be demanded to do in the 21st century. They look at history as something interesting in itself without trying to put it into a 21st century context. And you know, a university professor from Oxford, who's the head of one of the departments there of history, was on one of their programs being interviewed by, I think, Dominic Sandbrook, and he said, you know, this is what history taught at university level should be and never is. And then they got into a discussion of a similar politicization of history, of sociology, of anthropology, of so many subjects that always have to have this crazy New York Times style headline of someone being pansexual, whatever it may be, projected back into history as if somehow our only interest in history is whether they measure up to our idea of justice or racial diversity, whatever it may be. You know, I am a liberal and I vote Democrat, and I'm sick of losing elections, and I think Trump won for a lot of reasons and not just because of woke this or that or pronouns or whatever. That's very simplistic. But I just have to say this. The growing number of people who mistrust the media and mistrust universities and distrust science and distrust the teaching of history are there precisely the more thinking versions of them like me, because we are tired of this simplistic approach not only to history and anthropology, but even to sports, where we have to think about it in terms of gender, where we have to think about it in terms of sexuality. And so whether it's Why I Love the Rest is History, which, by the way, is a great podcast, and I listen to all the time with my wife, Jeannie, and our dog, Zip, who wags his tail whenever he hears Dominic or Tom talking, because he knows we're going to all sit on Jeannie's bed, have snacks, and listen to a fantastic series and binge the American Civil War, whatever it may be. But the reason Jeannie and I love this is it's like an oasis, a shelter, a refuge from the politicizing, from the politics of the moment, which has infused everything. And I don't know how you feel after Trump was elected, but I look for those places even more than I used to, because you need a break from all this crap. I don't need to read a sports story in the New York Times which tells me that someone is pansexual when what they should be talking about is her ability as a skater. And so I just want to say this to my liberal friends on the left, especially to a lot of people who call themselves progressive Christians, who are pastors in churches and all the rest of it. It's time that you look past all this stuff. And I'm sorry to say this, but I think a lot of progressive religious people are so relieved to have anybody in the pews at all that they tend to cater to the type of folks who are there because they feel welcomed and maybe they were excluded elsewhere. But it means that they have gone so far in the other direction of making sure to make gender and race and all the rest of this, you know, the kind of thing when you're at a meeting and the first person somebody stands up and says at that meeting, inside a building, at a university or a church, progressive churches are the worst at this, you know, we're apologizing for the land we are on because this used to belong to such and such a tribe. Okay, I'm sitting on a property where the Pequots used to sit, and I have deep clamshell beds around this property where they used to throw their clamshells after fishing out onto the straits here nearby. And I am sorry for what happened to them. But unless I just shut, excuse me the language, the fuck up about this, or give the land back, making hand-wringing, virtue-singling apologies is just annoying every time a guest comes over or whatever it may be. We've got to stop this. We've got to look at the big picture. We have to understand that the stakes are too high now to virtue signal in ways that are simply nothing but trolling. The New York Times is still trolling the right wing and annoying them for no reason. Well, thanks a lot for nothing. You just helped lose an election, and you're going to do it again. And I'd say the same to evangelical left-wing progressive pastors who are trolling the right by being virtuous, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I say the same thing to all my right-wing neighbors who are MAGA devotees. Yes, I have some, and yes, I know them, and yes, some of them are good people and friends of mine. But you know, my neighbors and I are polite enough to know that even though they put a Trump sign up in their yard, they don't troll me when I go by because they know I'm a Democrat, because we're neighbors. We're all neighbors in this country. Cut it out. I may be wrong, but my name's Frank Schaefer. Thank you.